Hello, this is Kyra Magna, and this is Newage H53 Michael, or their take on G1 Omega Supreme. This is the largest bot that Newage has ever released, and the first with motorized features. We're going to take a look at him, but first, we are going to take a look at the packaging. The box is huge, with what looks like the Mechabot 1 packaging of his original toy, of course with the classic Newage artwork. There's a clamshell inside, and the figure is also covered with a plastic sheet when you open the box. And as you come around, there's product shots and a nice shot of Devi and Omega with a face that doesn't come with that Devi. Sweet. Included as well is an instruction sheet that I found quite informative, and I did not have to look online how to transform this figure. As for accessories, there isn't much to speak on, just these screwdriver and a screw for installing the batteries later. And with that out of the way, here is the figure. You'll note pretty quickly off the bat that he has a nice plastic finish, not quite matte, not quite metallic, not quite fully painted either, but that's understandable for a bot of his size. And coming in from the top down, there is of course his helmet, which features a red piece of plastic, gray piece of plastic, I don't believe painted. Then you have a clear visor, and underneath that you of course have the orange face with blue metallic eyes, which will lift up like so. And you get a nicer look at that gorgeous paint. That light really reflects off of it quite nicely. The sculpt itself for the face, I think, is pretty on point for the most part. You do have that more open mouth look across the lower half of the face, which Newage tends to go for, as I believe it makes a more defined mouth shape when looked at from a further away distance, as often with Legends figures you are looking. I think that the chin is a little recessed if you look in there, to be honest with you. I think that's kind of my only fault with this face sculpt. I think there's some real character to it as well. Of course, Omega, not quite an emotional character in the show, so I think that the blank stare works quite well for him indeed. And then, of course, we have up here his wings, which are an off-white, almost tan color. I would have preferred a more brighter white, maybe not a bright perfect white, but maybe some sort of dark gray. It's kind of carried as well as we move down to the forearms here. There is, of course, yellow, unpainted plastic here, gray, bunch of greebling across all the grays. I think that this yellow is painted across a unpainted red piece. Transparent red plastic here also looks quite nice. Omega is one of those more detailed characters on his model in the show, so Newage got to play a lot with those upper body greeble detailings, I think. Coming down to the arms here, of course, we have minimal detailing on the forearm, or on the bicep rather, and on the forearm, of course. There is a little more detailing, and the claw is a little small if you ask me, but I think that the sculpt itself is actually quite nice. There's little gun detailings throughout. And of course, as an asymmetrical character, we're going to take a quick look at the other side as well, which I think also looks quite nice with a lot of levels of greebles all over it. Tubes are well placed. I think these could have been placed across the top, but I don't really mind. It doesn't particularly matter. Some scenes it's drawn one way, some scenes it's drawn another. And as we come down, very plain crotch section, and moving down, the thighs are also quite plain, to be honest with you. I think that there are some greebles, like notches 1, 2, 3, 4, like on here, that they could have moved up to the thighs to give them more interest. But I don't hate this. I think that it works fine for the hypertoon aesthetic. Coming across the side, there's of course some more greebles. I think these ones are more intended for the alt mode, but they are quite intentionally placed in this mode as well. And the feet are also quite plain, as you can see. But on the bottom, they are not quite plain and actually feature a lot of detail and some rubber pads as well. And back all the way up. Of course, we have some yellow painted details across some more very plain, very toon accurate looking pieces across his back. And as we come up to the top here, we have a nice jetpack sort of detailing across here. More greebles on, of course, here as well. Quite a nice sculpt all in all, if you were to ask me. I think this figure is very successful in a lot of the individual sculpted pieces. The accuracy is absolutely something that all companies who are doing a toon style should strive for. I especially like this yellow paint here, as the side of Omega's body was indeed yellow, and so some companies struggle to fill out the yellow there, but they have indeed got it, and it looks wonderful. I think overall, though, aside from the sort of detailings and whatnot, the actual proportion of the figure could use a small bit of work. He is quite sort of dumpy, and I feel like they could have picked a better frame to reference, you know, when it came to his proportions. Maybe not quite Gabriel's proportions, the PX9 MP scale one, which also got a knockoff downscale in this scale. But that one sort of takes the heroic proportions to its logical conclusion, I would say, at the end game of that. And I don't know if that's quite for everyone. I personally am I'm a fan of it a little more than this, I think, but I think neither of them are wrong, and it's very much a preference thing. I appreciate some of the more committal to the strange details. The back of Omega's head has a strange shape to it. He's wider. The whole crotch section with how wide the thighs stick out is also quite toon accurate instead of streamlining it, which I appreciate as they're interesting character details. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a wonderful sculpt. There's not much to complain about, and it's really complemented by that gorgeous, gorgeous finish that you can expect from Newage. And as for gimmicks, there is just the one in the bot mode, which is, of course, the Omega attack mode, where you rotate his head around, move this ponytail down a bit. We'll grab his hand and open it up like so till the ratchet clicks. Then his chest will open up, and you get some nice red detailed pieces here. And then you have Omega in his attack mode. I mean, I don't care for this at all. It's nice. Yeah, anyway, moving on. All right, and as for articulation, we're going to come down from the top down, as always. The head is going to swivel 360 degrees around, and you can even, by untabbing this a little bit, pulling out, it's very tight, but it'll allow you to pull out a neck. I'm sure you can do it while it's tabbed in, but I struggle to do it. As you can see, there's a neck there. It'll go up, it'll go a little bit down. I like it. The neck is sculpted quite well, and it works, and it is optional as it will just collapse back down. Great job. Coming down to the arms here, we're of course going to get out about this much before we start running into the shoulders. Shoulders will move out of the way like so, and move all the way up, and that allows you to get about as far up as you'll ever need with some sculpt break to the shoulder here, exposing a screw, kind of ugly. Bringing that back down, we're going to have a 360 bicep swivel. And from there, we're going to have 90-degree elbow, plus a double joint, which will get you to about 180. Ugly sculpt break, but with nice die-cast joint here, so you know it's strong. It works. I don't like the sculpt break, but at least the mechanical detail look to it is nice. And from here, of course, you have the claw hand, which will rotate 360. Cool. And the claws themselves are ratcheted like so, in and out on one click, and then we'll be able to friction in between those clicks. And then they are jointed at the finger and will bend about just past 90 degrees like so. They're strong joints, and they do hold all the weight you could need if you need them to hold a Constructicon or something. So highly, highly deserving of praise, I think. The other arm is the exact same, minus the claw articulation, of course. Quite nice. Nice ratchets throughout as well. And coming down to the waist here, you're going to get a 360, and it works quite well. Big fan of that. Nice and smooth and strong ratchet once again. Speaking of strong ratchets, we're going to get an ab crunch that gets us below 90 degrees, but it's enough for the character, and there is this nice sort of filler piece here that so the sculpt break isn't egregious. Strong ratchet, so it holds the weight of this big, big figure. He will, in fact, pretty much stand on his own, fully ab crunched and whatnot, which is impressive. And coming down to the legs here, you're going to be able to kick out just past 90 degrees. You know, I'll give it to them. It works for me. And then the front leg motion is kind of interesting because it's a super tight ratchet, but there's this metal die cast piece here that holds the leg assembly on, and that'll click out to about here. And then from there, there is a tooth ratchet here. And of course, that will get you just a little more range. So this is kind of sculpt breaky, which is why they give you the alternative one. But if you need this full range, he absolutely gets it. And will, in fact, even stand with his leg kicked up. Very impressive. Coming out from there, of course, You end up freeing up a little more range upwards as well when you pull out this piece. And you also gain access to a full 360 thigh swivel. Quite nice indeed, quite nice. And as we come down to the leg here, you're going to see there is a double jointed knee. So first one gets you to about here, 90 degrees, whatever. And then the second one will let you fill that out to 180 with an ugly sculpt break here. But if you were to use just the upper joint, I think that the sculpt break is actually pretty minimal for what it is. So props to Newage for that. And we'll swing back in. And on the foot, there is 90-degree ankle tilt. It does the job. And a toe tilt. Now, I wish the toe tilt was ratcheted because I actually struggle to get him to stand on his toes sometimes. You'll note that there's actually some rubber pads here which are supposed to help with gripping, but it still runs into some flaws, unfortunately. That said, everything is super tightly ratcheted, well toleranced. I'm very impressed with Newage overall when it comes to articulation. They didn't skimp out on anything. The only real articulation flaws are not in lack of joints, but in sculpt breaks, like on the elbows and knees. And of course, the thigh swivel also will get jammed, as will a couple joints get jammed on this crotch section because there's no skirting or anything. But you can sort of work around using every joint to finish out something nice. And I have pretty much hit every pose I could want with this character. So I'm going to give huge points to Newage for the articulation. And for some size comparisons, here he is with a Newage Constructicon. Here he is with Newage's 2.0 Bumblebee. Here he is with Newage's Ultra Magnus. Here is Magic Square's Brawl. Here he is with Newage's Skyfire. And here he is with Magic Square's Devastator. You'll love this scale, I think. He's just slightly taller than both Devastators, as the Magic Square and Newage are about the same height. They look amazing together. The size of this figure is huge, and I think the scale is perfect. And as for the transformation, it's a standard Omega Supreme, so the first things first is we're just going to parts form everything out. The arms actually come off on their own armature connected to each other instead of just the forearms, which is interesting and makes for an interestingly proportioned rocket a little later. You pop the legs off, pop the tracks off, and pop the middle of the chest off. Nothing new. The body main part will sit down, obviously. I struggle with some tabs here a little bit. They're a little fine, but you can't get them out with a tool, as you can see here. Collapsing the rocket down is also kind of unique in the way that the shoulder pads end up becoming part of the rocket, folding into the inner armature that connects the two arms together. It gives you this very long proportioned rocket, which I think is what Newage was going for. And so I think that it's quite successful in that regard. And it's pretty fun to get everything stuck together, if a teensy bit fiddly. As you can see here, my copy of the tank is broken. I pointed out a little bit. Yeah, it just snapped off me because the spring-loaded joint there was over-tightened and exploded on me. I still can't find the screw cover. I will be getting some replacement parts in, I hope, as I bought this from Shozi, and they are pretty good with their replacements. But the rest of the tank sort of just folds out. I really like the faux head being hidden inside to use as the tank turret. I think that's quite creative, and I gotta commend Newage as it works quite well. There's me putting together even more parts forming, can't complain. It actually ends up holding together despite the breakage, so it's not the end of the world. The legs fold out a whole ton as well, obviously to make tracks. It's cool that the indent for the rail actually will run all the way across them. I think it's quite a cool look, and it works quite well, as you'll see a little later when we get to the alt mode. Connecting everything up is pretty simple as well. It's a little floppy with just how large the ring is, but it is pretty secure sitting on a desk, which is the only place that you're going to need it. And once we get everything in, yellow things get in, and you're done. Let's take a look. And here is Omega in his defense base, rocket base, tank, rocket ship mode. Whatever this mess of parts that is, that is what he has turned into. So number one is huge. The just sheer square footage, gigantic. Yeah, it's a large piece. And then there's a bunch of pieces we're going to take a quick look at. It does look quite nice together, though. Very reminiscent of the original toy, very reminiscent of the cartoon. So it's doing everything just right. So we're going to take a quick look at the tank here first. Once again, my copy of the tank is a little bit broken, and so please keep that in mind if a piece falls off. So the tank itself is well sculpted, I think. The amount of greebles is quite appropriate, especially along the sides here, which don't show up in robot mode on a lot of these pieces because they're hidden within the chest. They get to play around a lot with that sort of detailing. The faux head looks amazing with this flat, sort of reflective orange paint. Red paint here, then an unpainted red sort of gun on the end there. Unpainted yellows. I mean, it works for me. This gap here is quite ugly. I am not a fan of it. Not sure why that wasn't sort of patched up, but yeah, I don't care about this sort of as a tank. It's not convincing enough as anything real world that I'm going to be mad about it. The tank will move 360 like so. Yeah, quite a nice piece. And we'll take a look at the rocket itself. I mean, it's a giant gray tube with greebling on it. Yeah, I mean, I like it. It works. It's a little long, I think. It could have been a little, like, wider, and I think it could have looked more proportionate. It works either way. Yellow seams show through because the gray paint is a little bit underpainted to allow for the clean look on the robot mode, so I commend them for not taking the alt mode over the bot mode when it came to their priorities. Yeah, there's like gray paint. It looks quite nice. The greebling is maxed out as well. And there is a little gimmick on it. Let's see if we can't... basically, you want to just untab this a little bit. And we're going to get something to sort of help me out a little bit in here. We'll just use my hand. All right, there you go. And we'll tap that back in. And you actually have a little sort of boarding lane pop out. I mean, it works. It's cute. No one is small enough to board into this thing, unfortunately. Even convincingly look like it requires some sort of Doctor Who Micromaster scale sort of thing. And as for the rest of the base, I actually think it works quite well. There is, of course, a track running across here that we're going to get to very soon. The sculpt is quite nice, as is the finish, just like we saw earlier. Little gaps in the track some places. I can't really show them on camera because I'm not picking this thing up. It will become floppy if you pick it up, so that is something to note. There is some gray detailing here. It looks like some sort of landing pad or something. I can't really quite remember what it's supposed to be, but it all works. I mean, there's kind of this pseudo alt mode look to the entire thing because the tank looks like a tank, the rocket looks like a rocket, the rest is a little more iffy, but that's how Omega's always been, so it works for me. I don't need it to be pretty, I need it to just work as what it is, and it does work. And there is, of course, the sacred gimmick on this toy. So to use it, number one, you're going to need to unscrew this with the included screwdriver. I used my own, which is why mine was still in the package. Put a A27 battery in there, and then when you're finally gotten all that done, there's these two little notches on the base of the tank, which you can sort of flick out with a tool because there's little holes in them. And then from here, you put these into the grooves on the track like so. We're going to make sure that everything is nice and flat. And then there is a button on the front of the tank here. And if you just press it, you'll sort of just drive around the track. And yeah, I mean, look, I love this feature. I was not sold on it when it was first announced. But when I got it in hand, I actually watched it run around the track until the entire battery drained. I had to get another battery to put in this thing because it was so much fun to watch. I could watch this for hours. It works great. It's either your thing or it's not, but it is a thing, and I think everyone should at least try it once. For an alt size comparison, here's a Newage Constructicon. Yeah, he's big. All right, and as for my final thoughts, first thing I'm going to talk about is the price. This is a $170 figure, $160 depending where you buy it. I picked it up from Show Z for about that price. That is an expensive price tag for a Legends figure, even of one of this scale. But I think that the motor is put in there, which sort of buffs up the price, as is a lot of that sort of die-cast pieces and whatnot. So you kind of are getting what you pay for in a lot of ways in the quality of the figure. The finish is quite clean, as is the paint, and the motor feature works well as well. My copy did break though, and I don't think that a $160, $170 figure should be breaking. And so I will have to get replacement parts for that, and I think it should be noted that this figure does not have perfect QC. The aesthetic is gorgeous, hitting that nice G1 note with still some subtle touches up to everything, with a quite cohesive look. Big fan, and I think it really works for the character. The shelf presence is amazing. Putting this guy next to anyone smaller than him will immediately give you a huge sense of scale in that bot mode, and I think that it would work great on absolutely any Legends collection shelf, especially with how scarce Autobot combiners are in the current market. It's quite a fun figure as well. The transformation is a blast. The motor feature makes anyone smile. And of course, the articulation is a lot of fun to pose. I think that for this price point though, this is not a must-have pickup figure. I think that this is a, if you're committed to Legends, you have to have this. If you just pick up cool things, you can think about if you want to skip it or not. This is not quite the absolute best release, but it's probably a top 10, top 15 release from Newage of all time. All right, I have been Kyra Magna. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!